my name is Tierney Zartowski and I'm the Makerspace Specialist at the Rochester Hills Public Library. Today I'm going to be showing you how to finger crochet. This is part of one of our take and make projects for the month of November. Patrons of the library will be able to come and pick up a take and make project while supplies lasts. You also will need to register online in order to get your project, but you can also do this project with some yarn you have at home. This is what our finished project is going to look like. Of course, yours may look a little different depending on if you want to make it a little bigger or a little smaller. Today we are making, you could use it as a purse or a market bag for when you go to the store. It's really up to you. So the only other thing that you're going to need besides your take and make bag is a pair of scissors. So you want to have those handy. And of course, your fingers for finger crochet. So when you get your bag, you'll get your yarn. And the first thing you want to do is pull the yarn out of the center. It may be stuck back in there and you may have to find it. And then you'll also want to roll some of your yarn out. Traditionally, when you crochet, you'll always start with the yarn that's in the center because it's much easier to work with. But today we're actually going to be working with both. The reason we're working with two yarns is because we're making a bag and we want it to be sturdier. So we're going to be doubling it up. To start, you'll make sure that both your ends are even. And we're going to start with a slip knot. The way I make a slip knot, and there's different ways to do it, so I start by wrapping it around my finger, and you want to make sure you have a little bit of extra room on your tail. So I have a cross. Then you're going to pull the loop through the center of your loop to make a slip knot. This will be your starting knot. Now when you're finger crocheting, you do want to make sure that your knot is quite big. You want to be able to get your finger through it, and you actually want to be able to get two fingers through it. So as you're doing this, your yarn, your loop may begin to shrink. That's okay. Just make sure you're able to keep it a little loose and pull your knot out. It does help to have quite a bit of this pulled out and ready to go. Since we're working with two yarns, there's probably going to be some time where they cross and they double up on you. You'll just have to watch that. So we'll get started here. First thing you want to do when you're crocheting is you loop the yarn around your pinky and then around your index finger. I'll show you again. You'll loop your yarn around your pinky and then around your index finger. As you're crocheting, the yarn should just slip through both of those. The reason we hold our yarn like this is because we're able to keep it taut, and it's a lot easier to work with than a slack line. To start, we're going to chain 20 chains. How we chain is you pull the yarn through your loop, and that's a chain. So again, I'm just pulling the yarn through that loop from the slip knot that I made. So I have 2 so far, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And notice how the line is just kind of moving through my fingers. It just keeps it easier and it keeps it from knotting as well. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and we're going to do one more to make 21. Notice how I did have to keep pulling this out as I went. You might want to just pull a bunch out, but you do want to be careful because you don't want them to get knotted into themselves. So you want to keep your knots loose, especially when you're finger crocheting. Sometimes, depending on what you're crocheting, you may want to keep it tight. For this, you'll want to keep it loose so that you can keep your fingers in there. So now that we have our chain of 21, we are going to go ahead and start our next row. Whenever you start a new row, you always want to skip your first stitch. So right here is my first stitch. I'm going to skip going into that one, and I'm going to go into the next stitch. The stitches look like these little loops. So this is stitch 1, here's the next one, here's the next one. When you go in through a stitch, you're going to put your finger through. You'll have 4 yarns on top, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there'll be 2 yarns on the bottom because we're using a double yarn. So again, I'm skipping the first hole, going to the next one. I'm gonna go through, pull my yarn up, so I have 2 loops on my finger. Now there's 4 yarns on here, but there's 2 loops. I'm gonna do just like I would with the chain, pull through my loop and pull the yarn through. So I'll go to the next one. I'm gonna go through and notice how this hole got smaller because that one got bigger. Sometimes you might have to pull it a little bit. This is why it's important to keep them a little big. I got 4 yarns on top, 2 on the bottom. Pull my yarn through, yarn up. I have 2 loops on my finger. Just like a chain, I'll pull the yarn through. And I'm going to keep going with that, and you'll get the hang of it. As you continue to do this, you'll be able to spot the stitches a little easier. You'll also get the hang of how to make your stitches bigger so that it's easier to get into the stitch. Make sure my yarn's not tangled. Notice how big these stitches are up here compared to the ones down here. Oftentimes the first row is the most difficult because it's a little tighter than the rest of the rows will be. Go through 4 yarns on top, pull my loop through. I have 2 loops on top, pull it through. So you'll continue to do this all the way through to all 20 stitches. Now you may be wondering, why did I do 21 stitches in odd number? Remember, we first skipped that first stitch at the beginning. If you don't skip that stitch, your work will start to look like a triangle. It will grow, or it will get bigger, depending on if you skip the stitch or add too many stitches. So you want to make sure you're not doing that. Sometimes it's a little easier to do this first row with a hook than it is your fingers. Always making sure you got 4 yarns on the top and 2 on the bottom. That's how you know you're doing it correctly. And then I'm going to go into that last one. And that should be 20. Now, after your last stitch, the next thing you're going to do is just chain 1. This helps you from skipping stitches. If you don't do that last chain, just like if you don't skip that first stitch, this is the stitch that you're skipping. That's why we make that, so that you're not making your work look like a triangle. After you do that first row, you want to give it a little tug, kind of stretch it out, and I would do that after each row. And then you'll turn your work. Now, I did 30 rows for my bag. You, however, can make them as your bag as big as you want or as small as you want. You don't have to do that many, or you could do that many. It's up to you. As you can see, now it's much easier to see your stitch than it was on that first row. So we'll just, again, skipping that first one, we skipped this one. I went in through this one. We're making sure we have 4 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and we'll continue to chain through all of your rows. I sped up the process a little bit so you guys don't have to watch me do all my rows, but you'll want to stop with your rows when your bag is about twice the size you want it to be, because now we're going to be folding over your rows to complete your bag. You could do this horizontal and sew the seams up here, or you could do it vertical, depending on what shape you want your bag to be. Before you do that, I'll show you how to finish your row. For your last row, you'll go in through your last stitch. Pull that through. Got 2 yarns on, pull through, and this time I'm just going to pull the whole tail through. Then I will actually weave the yarn through and create another slip stitch. Remember, slip stitch is just pulling it through that yarn. And you can just continue to do that through the first couple stitches. I would probably do at least 5 stitches. And you're just going to slip stitch through all of them. You could also do it where it's called weaving your tail in, where you just kind of weave the tail through the holes that you see there. I did 2 different color yarns on this, which you're also welcome to do. It just adds a little bit of color, a little more color to your bag. It's up to you with how you want your bag to look. If you have a little bit extra, you can always cut off your tail. You probably want to do another slip stitch to end it after you've woven them through quite a bit. And then we will cut your tail off. So again, you could fold your bag horizontal, or you could fold it vertical, depending on how you want your bag to work. I'm going to do mine this way. So the next thing you'll need to do is gather up another 2 strings. I'm going to do a double color this time. Don't need this one. I'm going to pull through the middles of these because it's much easier to work with. And I'm going to start with another slip knot. So remember, I fold it over my finger to create that X. Then I pull the yarn through the middle of that again, hold my tail, and pull down. I'm now going to feed this loop through both ends of the bottom of my bag. Hold that. So now this will be the working loop that I work with. Make sure I get my tail out of the way. And now I can continue slip stitching. So pull through my loop. Now I will go through the next stitch. I'm joining the 2 stitches together, so I've actually got about 8 yarns this time on my loop. Pull the yarn through. And this time, instead of bringing this yarn through the 2 loops, I'm actually just going to bring that first loop through the other loop. So I'm going to go through both stitches, pull my yarn through, and then I pull this yarn through the loop. This is what makes it a slip stitch. We do the slip stitch this time because it's a little more secure. It's a little harder with this yarn. This yarn is quite thin, so it's a little slippery on my fingers, but we do the slip stitch because it is more secure than chaining these 2 ends together. And I'll continue to do this down the end of my bag and then up the other side. Depending on how you chose to join your 2 ends together, you may do one end and then tie it off, and then do the next end and tie it off. It's up to you, as long as your 2 ends of your bag are tied securely. This may look a little confusing, the slip stitch, but as long as this loop is going through this loop, that is what a slip stitch is. It's much easier to do a slip stitch with a needle than it is to do hand crochet. or a hook, sorry. So if you have a crochet hook, maybe a little easier to do that here. And again, I'm just going to continue all the way up to finish my bag. All right, now that you have your bag side sewn up, you're ready to start your handle. So you're going to be actually working with 4 yarns this time. So however much yarn you have left, you want to pull out of your skein and double it up and then cut in half. That way you have 4 yarns left. And we're working with 4 yarns this time because you want your handle to be extra sturdy, because this is what will be holding your bag. Especially if you use it as a market bag, you'll want it to be really sturdy. We'll start with our slip stitch again. And this time, we're just going to do what we did before, just with the chain. So we're just pulling through the loop and going through the loop and pulling the yarn up. Pretty easy. You should be familiar with. It is working with 4 yarns can be a little bit more difficult to keep your yarns from tangling up. So you can see I do have a bit of a mess here, so you will have to watch that. Now, I can't tell you how many chains to do here because everybody's handles will be different. It's up to you how long you want your chain to be, or how long you want your handle to be. However, whenever you get to that length is when you can stop chaining. Now, if you really wanted your handle to be sturdy and you had enough yarn left, you could always do a second row on this handle and go back through just like you did for the bag and chain and do your single stitches through this row if that's what you wanted to do. It would certainly make it sturdy. But doing the 4 yarns really makes it quite sturdy as well. It gets quite difficult to keep the yarn straight when you have so many. Once you're done making your handle and it's to the length that you want, all you need to do is pull through the loop to tie it off and then attach it to one of the ends of your bag. I like to use a knot called the granny square knot. So I am going to go under the first time I tie the knot, and then I'll go over the next time. So we'll tie it off. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side, going through the stitch and just tying it to your bag. Can get a little difficult when you are using so many yarns. And there you have it. You have a nice new bag. Finish off your bag. You can clip your ends to give it a nice, clean, finished look. And there you have it, a nice new bag. I hope you've enjoyed this project, and I hope we get to see you again for more Take and Make projects.